I'm going to start this out with my image of the week. I'm a sick person. Hey guys, Kyle here from Universal Critics, getting ready to do another Game of Thrones recap and review. So this recap will contain spoilers up through episode 3 of season 6 entitled Oathbreaker. So a bunch of stuff happened this week. Let's get into it. This episode starts out with Jon Snow sitting at a table, recently resurrected by Melisandre, and he's sitting there and he's touching his wounds, and he's completely freaked out by being brought back from the dead. I think as any of us would be, right? I mean, this character was dead, he remembers his murder, and he's sitting there so confused and so terrified. And you can see the look on Kit Harington's face. He's like, I was just dead, and now I'm back. And that's good for us, but scary for him, and I completely understand. Davos is sitting there on the other side of the room looking at Jon Snow in just a disbelief type face. He's sitting there and Davos runs over to him and clothes him with his cloak. And Castle Black's not really a place you want to be without clothes because it's very cold there. As Davos is trying to talk down Jon Snow, Melisandre walks in there super surprised and says, the Lord of Light has brought you back. What was it like on the other side? Now we've seen this with Beric Dondarrion too, where he says that there is nothing. And she just gets reconfirmation from Jon Snow that there's nothing, and she doesn't look too surprised about that. She looks like, okay, I've accepted that the fact that there's probably nothing after this afterlife, or at least nothing that we can remember can explain. So Jon Snow eventually gathers himself together, gets dressed, walks out of there, sees the wildlings with his brothers from the Night Watch, and he's sitting there being greeted by all of them. And then we leave off there at the end of the episode, and then I'll get back to what takes place after the end of the episode. Then after the Castle Black stuff, we go to Sam and Gilly on a boat, what we think is headed to Oldstown. Sam and Gilly have this exchange. Sam's feeling very sick, and Gilly's trying to comfort him. And Sam, who wants what's best for Gilly, says that we're not actually going to Oldstown. Sam is taking Little Sam and Gilly to Hornhill, where we should be able to see the rest of Sam's family, including Randall Tarley, who has some big implications later on in the season. But Gilly doesn't understand why they can't go to Oldstown, or why they can't go to the Citadel, and Sam explains, like, I don't have a Jon Snow there, I don't have a Mr. Aemon there to help get past the rules. So the safest place for Little Sam and Gilly is back in Hornhill. Then we go to what I think is one of the most interesting things of this episode, and that's Bran's vision of the past. Now, I did this in my Season 5 recap under the prediction segment, and I thought that we would get a Tower of Joy flashback. And we did. We saw a young Ned Stark and a young Howland Reed go against the Kingsguard, Sir Arthur Dayne. So now Ned and Arthur Dayne are having a fight, and how do you make someone who only has 5 minutes of screen time, maybe not even that, 2 minutes of screen time, look really, really good and you know that he's a badass? Nah, he wields 2 swords. And last year during the Dorne storyline, there was some backlash for not the most impressive choreographed fight scenes. This one, however, with the swordplay, probably one of the best choreographed fight scenes in the entire show. I mean, Dayne is just wailing and wailing with 2 swords, and he's taking on 4 people, and you're like, okay, this guy obviously knows what he's doing. He's a badass, I get it. This guy's a Kingsguard for a reason. So Arthur Dayne stabs and kills all the other soldiers that Ned Stark's with, and now he's alone with Ned Stark. And Bran even says out loud, man, Dayne is better than my dad. Ned Stark gets disarmed, and as Ned Stark is about to die, Howland Reed, the father to Jojen Reed and Meera Reed, stabs Arthur Dayne in the back. Now, this is kind of a big shock for Bran, because he's always been told that Ned Stark beat Arthur Dayne in the combat. So you can see now in the show that the history of actually what happened and the legends about what happened are not the same thing. So you're starting to see like, oh, okay, maybe that some of these people who have these grand stories and everything didn't exactly do everything that was said about them. And then something really crazy happens. Ned hears screams from the top of the Tower of Joy, and we all think we know what that is. And he starts running up the stairs, and Bran calls out, Father. And Ned turns around like he actually heard him. Now, hold on a second. Bran has the ability to change the past, maybe? Is this a thing? I don't know if this is a book thing. I don't know if this is something already that people know about. But it looked like he had the ability to affect the past. He called out to Ned Stark. Ned Stark turned around and then continued up to the stairs. I find that incredibly interesting, and when Bran confronted the Three-Eyed Raven about it, he said, no, the past has already been written, the ink is dry. but I don't know if that's necessarily true. Does Bran have powers more powerful than the Three-Eyed Raven? Now, because I'm only a show watcher, I don't have extra knowledge about this. I found that very interesting, and I'm very curious about where they're going to go with this. The next thing that we jump to is Daenerys going to Vos Dothrak. The high priestess of the widowed Khaleesi's is sitting there and talking to Daenerys, and they strip her down and they put her in rags. And the Dosh Khaleen says that you were the wife of a great Khal, and you're supposed to come here right away, but you went out and explored the world first, and that's forbidden. And now there's going to be a gathering of all the Khals, and they're going to decide your fate and what to do with you. Now, if you're paying attention to the clues and everything, here's what I think is going to happen. Daenerys is going to have a perfect opportunity to demonstrate her power with her dragons in front of all the Khals of Dothraki land. So, if the whole result of this is that Daenerys comes away with a Dothraki army at her side, and she has the Second Sons, the Unsullied, and a Dothraki army, I think we're getting pretty close to her finally getting to Westeros. Then we jump to Meereen, where we see Varys waiting for Vala. I didn't even know she had a name. I just remember her as the topless girl who was killing the Unsullied for the Sons of the Harpy. But anyway, Varys talks to her and does his Varys very sneaky thing where he says, "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm just here to tell you that your life is going to be unpleasant if you don't cooperate with me." So after implying that tragedies could befall her son if she were to die, she gives up information about who's funding the Sons of the Harpy, and we find out that it's the Masters of Yunkai, the Masters of Astapor, and the Masters of Volantis. And Tyrion, with his great wisdom, says, we should have a conversation with them. Let's talk about this. So I don't know what the diplomacy methods are right here. Tyrion seems a little hesitant to go to war with these guys. I'm very curious about what's going to happen with the rest of this storyline for sure. Then the next spot we go to is King's Landing, and we see that Qyburn has assumed control of Varys' little birds after Varys left King's Landing. Cersei comes down to talk to Qyburn and says, I don't just want little birds in King's Landing. I want little birds all over Westeros. I want to know what's going on in all the lands. I want to know what's going on in Dorne. I want to know what's going on everywhere. So, and it looks like Qyburn is now the new Master of Whisperers for the king. Then Cersei and Jaime try to hijack a small council meeting with Kevin and Lady Olinda and Master Pycelle and Mace Tyrell. And that doesn't really go over well because Uncle Kevin isn't really having any of it. And he says, all right, you're right. You have the right to sit here at the small council. Then we have the right to not have a small council meeting right now. And he essentially leaves, and the Mountain and Jaime and Cersei are just sitting there at the small table with no one to talk to now. Moving over to Braavos. So Arya is finally let back into the House of Black and White, and she's doing really cool montage training, right? She's doing like that Rocky Balboa type training where she's getting a little better with each thing, and she's learning how to fight without the use of her eyes. It's really a very cool montage, and we're starting to see the Arya storyline really pay off at this point in the show. It was a little slow build last year when we got that one really great episode with the killing of Meryn Trant, but now we're starting to see Arya become nobody because we see her drink the poison and it doesn't kill her, so maybe this is a sign that she's ready to let Arya go and actually become a faceless man. And they also did something pretty sneaky in this episode. If you remember when she was being questioned about who her brothers were, she said that she had 4 brothers and she got hit for lying. And then she said she only had 3 brothers. And that apparently was the truth. But as far as Arya knows, Jon Snow is a half-brother, so I don't understand why she'd get hit for saying she had 4 brothers. Because a half-brother's still a brother. But maybe if Jon Snow's not really her brother, that's why she would get hit. I think you're just seeding the Jon Snow storyline into other storylines. And there was one more thing. They mentioned the Hound, and that Arya thought that he was dead. Could they be foreshadowing the Hound's return in this episode? I hope so. I really like the character, and I'd like to see him come back and see another interaction between him and Arya. Then we go back up to Winterfell, where Ramsay is holding a meeting with Lord Umber. And Umber is saying, we've been fighting wildlings for years, and now there's a bunch more wildlings because Jon Snow let them through the gates. We need more men. And Ramsay says, well, pledge fealty to me, and I will help you out. We'll help each other out. But Lord Umber's like, I'm not going to pledge fealty to you. I'm not going to get down on my knees and kiss your hand. Forget that. I got a better idea. Here's a couple presents. And he walks out 2 people with bags on their heads, and as soon as they came out, I knew exactly who they were. He takes off one bag, and it's Asha. which means that he takes off the other bag and it's Rickon Stark. And Ramsay gets up from his table and says, how do I know that this is Rickon Stark? Well, Lord Umber leaves the room for a second and comes back with Shaggy Dog's head in a hunk. And so now Shaggy Dog is dead. And we know that the Starks don't do too well when their dire wolves are gone. So I'm a little upset about that, but there was a theory that maybe this is all some sort of trick, that the Umbers are actually very loyal to the Starks, and this is all somehow going to backfire on Ramsay. I hope that's true, but I'm just going to take the show for what it says right now, and that's that there's another Stark in the hams of Ramsay, and that doesn't go too well. See Sansa. Then we get to the last part of the episode and we head back to Castle Black, where Jon Snow is going to do his last act as the Lord Commander, and that's oversee the execution of everyone who murdered him. So when we get outside, we see 4 people with nooses around their neck, the 2 big ones being Ollie and Alliser, and Jon Snow's walking down the line getting everyone's last words, and he gets to Alliser, and Alliser says, "You put me in a terrible choice, and if I had to do it all over again, I pray that I make the right decision again." So Alliser's basically confirming that he feels like he's done nothing wrong. And then Jon Snow walks over to Ollie, and Ollie just gives him this blank look. He's still so angry at Jon Snow for letting the wildlings in. Now, I get where Ollie's coming from, he's a kid, but I hate him, and he's terrible, and I'm glad he's finally gone. So Jon Snow walks over to the rope, cuts the rope with his sword, and those 4 guys get hanged. I also thought it was kind of odd that there was only 4 of them, because I'm pretty sure if I rewatched the last episode of Season 5, there's a lot more people stabbing Jon Snow than just 4 guys. I'm curious how he came up with those 4 guys as the people he needed to kill, but whatever, I'm going to let it go for now. Then Jon Snow, after that, takes off his cloak, gives it to Ed, says, "Burn it, wear it, do whatever you want with it," walks away, and says to himself, "My watch has ended," which is huge, which means now Jon Snow is freed of his Night's Watch vows and is able to get back into the politics of Westeros, which is going to be awesome, especially with Sansa now arriving at Castle Black next week. Now, there's a lot of speculation about whether Jon Snow actually left Castle Black or whether he just went back to his room. The way it was shot was kind of weird, so we don't actually know. But I'm really hoping they don't do another thing where 2 Starks just nearly miss each other again. I'm getting sick of that. I would like to see some sort of Stark reunion. Let's just make it so Jon Snow just went north of the wall to go pray to like a wayward tree or something. That would be better. So that's it for all the storylines of this week. What we didn't see is we didn't see Sansa, but we know she's on her way to the wall. And we also didn't see Dorne for the 2nd week in a row, which I'm okay with. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of the Dorne storyline. I find it kind of boring. I'd rather see what's going on in King's Landing, Winterfell, and at the Wall. But that's just me. Alright guys, thanks for listening. Remember to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment. Which storyline are you looking to forward the most? Do you have any predictions for this upcoming episode or the rest of the season? As always, this is Kyle from Universal Critics. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Universal Critics Podcast. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit us at universalcritics.com.
Now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally?
I will find him! I do not need your sympathy or your admiration. All I need is your compliance.
Let me explain what's happening here. You are a criminal.
What are you doing? Find me when you wake up.
Shadows in the night, completely unseen.